Good evening. My name is Mark Barnekow, and I'm the Executive Director of the University of Chicago Francis and Rose Yuen campus here in Hong Kong. The Yuen campus in Hong Kong is our premier location in Asia, representing UChicago values of free and open discourse, rigorous debate, and the exchange of ideas. Tonight's program is part of our new series, UChicago Focus, an informational program where we shine the light on the best of UChicago, and our audience members in Asia and around the globe ask their questions. The Yuen campus team developed this program to share the amazing work being done by our colleagues in UChicago's professional schools, divisions, departments, and centers. UChicago Focus will share specific areas of expertise, unique faculty research, and questions faculty and students are addressing, as well as little-known activities that are having an impact on our world. These programs will interest you whether you're an alumni, a student, a prospective student, or the general community. If you're a UChicago alumni, we'll be hosting our second UChicago Focus tomorrow night with alumni board member Norman Young. He'll discuss how our alumni in Asia can apply or be nominated for UChicago's highly coveted alumni awards. If you're part of the UChicago community, I hope you'll sign up on the events page at our website at uchicago.hk and join us tomorrow night. For tonight's program, please submit your questions through the questions and answer button on Zoom, and I'll make sure to ask them of our special guest this evening. Tonight, we're very fortunate to have Ranjan Daniels, Senior Associate Dean of the Harris School of Public Policy, join us from Chicago. Ranjan is the Senior Associate Dean of Student Recruitment and Global Outreach for the University of Chicago Harris School of Public Policy. He leads admissions, financial aid, executive education, new program development, and international partnerships. He's a strategist, innovator, and student recruitment leader who excels at launching new programs, enhancing applicant diversity, and opening new international markets. Prior to joining Harris, Ranjan spent 20 years building new products and championing innovation at Kaplan, Berkshire Hathaway, the Tribune Company, and the City of Chicago. Ranjan earned an MBA from the Keller Graduate School of Management at Northwestern University and an MA in Public Policy from the University of Chicago Harris School of Public Policy. He earned his bachelor's degree in political science from Emory University. Ranjan, we're delighted to have you as our guest this evening, as the first to kick off our UChicago Focus series. I'll turn the stage over to you to share your initial presentation and join you later to share questions from our audience.
Thank you, Mark, and it's an honor and delight to be with the Hong Kong Center. The global centers are such an important part of the UChicago experience. It gives us a touch point in some of the most important parts of the world in terms of policy innovation. So thank you, Mark, and your team for making this possible. And good evening or good hello to all those that are joining us today. I'd love to get a little better feel for what you would like to learn about the Harris School or UChicago or policy across the globe. So we've got a poll that's coming up, and please fill that out so we can kind of get a sense of, I want to make sure you get the most out of this program. As Mark mentioned, I oversee admissions, executive education, marketing, and financial aid and international partnership for the Harris School. I'm a graduate of the program. And at the University of Chicago, we believe very strongly in having, attracting the best research faculty in the world in economics, in medicine, in business, in law, in social sciences. And then having people from around the world learn, study, challenge those ideas, and then take those ideas and put those into practice around the world to transform lives. And I think when you think about the transformational power of science, of economics, of data, there's no better vehicle than public policy. We need thriving enterprises, we need businesses to succeed, we need healthcare. But we also need to take the intersection of data and policy and put that into practice on climate change, on educational equality, on economic development, on sustainable development. These are all the problems that countries across the world are dealing with. We're all facing the challenges of COVID and the pandemic. which has created some challenges, but also uncovered long-standing issues of inequality or poverty or inefficiencies in healthcare. So the faculty at the Harris School and our alumni and our students are working on these challenges. And I think, when I used to travel around the world, I would talk to leaders in India, China, Japan, and what they care about is not so much their businesses or their industry. They care about like what is happening across their country and what they can do to put in place the pillars of sustainable development, of economic mobility, of equality. And when you think about those issues, the public policy is at the forefront, and it's an exciting time to be in policy. It's an exciting time to be at the University of Chicago. We have a new president that's about to join us in the fall. So this is it's a wonderful time to join us. And I'd love to share more about, the work of our faculty, opportunities to study with us, and sort of, global trends in the policy landscape. So, Mark I think he's gotten some questions from you guys, and I'd be delighted to share those and answer and be a resource to you.
Great, thanks, Ranjan. I guess I'm curious, my first question for you is, in your introduction, you have an MBA from Northwestern University and a master's degree in public policy. I guess just for the audience, what was your personal journey? How did you get an MBA and then go on to get a policy degree at Harris?
Thanks, Mark, for that question. So, my parents are doctors, and they believed a lot in education. My grandmother was a professor. My uncle was a Sanskrit professor at the University of Chicago. So I had school in my blood, and I love to learn. And I think nowadays you have to be a lifelong learner. So much is happening, so much is evolving. So you have to constantly be thinking about ways to skill up and get more knowledge. So I was a political science major at Emory, and I was fascinated by elections and campaigns and all that stuff. But I reached a point where I wanted to not just be able to spin or tweet or post a snippet on something. I wanted to really understand what's the right way to deal with, economic inequality, or what's the right way to deal with climate change. And I wanted to study those things. So I came to the Harris School. It was a very small school at the time. We've grown so much since then. But the faculty at UChicago, they focus on how do you find evidence and data and look at sort of the way people behave and look at sort of the sociology. It's a multidisciplinary approach to solve problems. I then took that training and put that into practice in the mayor's office in Chicago, in local government. In the US, we have a federal government, we have a state government, and a local government. And in the US, the local government is where you actually implement policy. A lot of things, there's great speeches that happen at the federal level, but ultimately it comes down to local leaders to put things into practice. And I got to do that on crime and public safety. I never studied that at University of Chicago. We don't study specific issues. We study how to solve systemic problems or how to deal with problems that nobody's seen before. So I did that for 6 years. And then similar to students at the Harris School or graduates, I went across sectors. So at the time, there was a lot of use of technology in policing and in law enforcement. It was the first time like law enforcement officers had computers. It's the first time they used sort of trends on data to solve problems. I mean, it seems kind of like that foreign, like of course they've always done that, but there were a lot of things that weren't really done until the late 90s in the US. So I did that, and that got me into technology. And then I went to work for a technology startup. And I also wanted to understand not just what the right thing to do, but how to run large enterprises or the systemic issues. And I think industry has a lot to inform government. I don't think problems are solved exclusively in one sector. They're solved cross-sectorally. So I went to Kellogg, got an MBA. I did learn though, Mark, that it's a lot easier to manage in the private sector in some ways, because you can incentivize people, you can bonus, you can stock option, you can get rid of people, fire, you can hire very easily. In government, you have constraints, and you have to be a much more adept manager and much more thoughtful and collaborative to solve problems. So I worked in the Tribune Company, a newspaper publisher, for a few years. I managed, operations. I worked at Berkshire Hathaway. Learned a lot, from the way Warren Buffett sort of thinks about industry. I didn't work with him, but his philosophy permeates the whole organization. So I learned a lot from that. But ultimately, I think, Mark, very similar to you, I was drawn back to higher education and the sense of human capital development. And that's something I've thought a lot about. My family cares a lot deeply about that. My parents taught it at medical schools. And I wanted to, be part of higher education in a way that is transformative. And it's sort of, if you are the first member of your family to go to college or graduate school, and I can help you do that, then I transform that family for the next 1,000 years. And, with some of the students we get at UChicago, I might be transforming hundreds and thousands of families by the research or the ideas that they bring together. And those ideas come from around the world. And, one of the reasons why I'm very excited to be here, Mark, is, the University of Chicago is, you pick a ranking, we're in the top 3 or 4 schools in the world in any discipline, business, public policy, medicine, law. Our college is at the top. But, 100 years from now, and this is when a great university doesn't think next quarter, next year, they think, 50, 100 years, much like people in Hong Kong and China. For us to be a great university in that top 4 or 5 in 100 years from now, we're going to have to do a lot in Asia and in China and in Hong Kong and India and Singapore and Vietnam, because this is where, at least in the public policy, but I think also in business, this is where great innovation is going to happen. I think when I think about climate change, I think a lot of the breakthroughs are going to happen in Asia. And if the University of Chicago isn't training people to be part of that, learning from experts who are doing it, working and collaborating, 100 years from now, we won't be in that top rankings. And we just have to look at a lot of the schools in England, right, that were, in 1890 or when the University of Chicago started 130 years ago, those were the top schools. And now they're not. They've been passed over by UChicago, Harvard, Stanford. And there'll be other schools that emerge unless we continue the work that we're doing with faculty and researchers in Asia, with business leaders. And I don't want it to be that it's not anywhere that we are going to teach Asia or China or Hong Kong how to solve these problems. The folks there are going to solve it, but I think we can do it together and learn from each other and take what's working in the US, add it back to what's happening over there. And that's what I've been doing for the last 5 or 6 years at Harris. We've had incredible growth. We've had 25, 30% growth in applications every year. I think our approach to data-driven, evidence-based solutions is resonating across the world. And I'm delighted to see the interest in Hong Kong and in China in our programs and across Asia. So that's been a great experience.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ranjan. You talk about growth, and I was wondering if you can, because this was one thing that struck me when we first met and started talking, is just the growth in the student body since you were a student to where we're at now, the faculty and how that's growing and kind of the areas of focus. Could you share a little bit of that with us?
Yeah, sure, Mark. I think, first of all, that it comes from a sense of motivation. Like, what is the purpose, right? And I think the purpose for our university leaders, President Bob Zimmer and our future president that's about to come in, it's all about getting our ideas out for impact. So it starts with ideas, and the people that I generate these ideas are faculty. So first, Harris invested in global faculty. We recruited James Robinson, the author of Why Nations Fail. We recruited Catherine Baker, a leading health scholar from Harvard, Chris Blattman. We've got a Nobel Prize winner joining us, Michael Kremer. So we are attracting the best faculty talent. So once we have the faculty talent, we then think about bringing in students to support the faculty, learn and expand those ideas. So we don't start with students, we start with the faculty, and then we scale up. And I think the motivation is, I think greatness sometimes for these universities is on, the number of people we exclude, right? How selective we are. And that's important. Like, you want to get the best, you don't want to sort of, you want to attract talent. But I think there's also an opportunity to say, how do we expand and make sure that our ideas get out to more people, right? And we don't want I don't want just 50 people learning from Michael Greenstone and Epic about how to deal with climate change. I want more people to study and learn that. I want more people to learn how James Heckman has been, 30, 40 years ahead of early childhood education. I mean, he was thinking about the investments in from 0 to 6 years old, what that can be in terms of lifelong learning. So when we think about those, if you have great ideas, you then want people to study and learn and challenge and improve. So that's the genesis. And I also think, Mark, in this world, there are a lot of politicians, a lot of them in the US, that, have kind of strayed away from sort of studying science and a lot of nuance and listening to global leaders and coming up with ideas, and have gone a lot with intuition and instinct and gut. And I think that's not the UChicago way. Our way is, there are a lot of good ideas on the left and the right, and we want to sort them out and put them and see what works. And the ones that are working, we want to do them more. The ones that aren't working, we want to fix, right? And it's this iterative process. And we believe as much in that process as we do in some of the outcomes, right? And I think that's the key thing that we focus on. And when you have that kind of when you have the core of faculty and the excellence across programs, it then lends itself to growing. And I think, we were, Mark, and this, I mean, we were one of the first universities to put centers up in Beijing, Hong Kong, and Delhi. And they aren't just like, these aren't WeWork little spaces. These are significant long-term investments in staff, in programming. We offer our business program out, the MBA out of your campus. So these aren't sort of like, we're not just putting the name tag up near the airport and saying we're here, right? We're actually involved in research on the ground. And it's a long-term relationship. It's not for the short term. It's because of the development that's happening there. So that's the genesis. And we also see a tremendous need. I mean, there are people and countries around the world that need to solve very tough problems, and we're seeing that with the pandemic. So I think you put that all together, it lends itself for a right formula of visionary leadership at the president of UChicago and President Zimmer. Incredible faculty, and a lot of demand and need for the way we solve problems.
Fantastic, thank you. You mentioned Delhi and you mentioned Beijing, and I know that Harris has done a fair amount of work in those two locations. As you look at Asia, how do you see that the geography in terms of where priorities are? Do you have specific country priorities where you'd like to recruit students from and bring them in and then have them go back to their home country? How do you think about that at Harris?
Well, we think I've got 3 kids. I don't have a favorite. We are all in on Asia across the board. The largest pool of alumni outside of the U.S. is from China. I actually went to school with the first Chinese national, Wei Kai, who's been an incredible alum. He's been a pillar of the financial community in Hong Kong, opening up UBS's office there, and has been very involved with the university. So that's a large base. One of the second largest group is from Japan, and that's been a long-standing sort of group since I was there for 25 years, of getting sort of government officials from the Bank of Japan or the finance ministry to study at Harris and then go back. So that's been a nice experience pool. And now we're getting people from the Bank of Indonesia and the government of Singapore and South Korea. So that's been a nice mix. And it's nice for government officials to build their social capital by meeting sort of their partners or counterparts in other areas. India has always been a part of UChicago for a long time. We've had faculty and recruited students, for almost a half century. So it's been a long-standing relationship there. And I think each country's different, but I think what we don't tend to be like country specific. We tend to think about what are the common issues that everybody's dealing with. Climate change, income inequality, overpopulation of cities. These are all things that everybody's wrestling with, even in the U.S., Mexico. So how do we take and learn from each other, and then how do we sort of find the best practice? And one of the things that our faculty focus a lot on is sort of measuring impact and seeing return. But when and I think there's a lot of other and I'd love to work with the Hong Kong team, because I think not everyone can come to Hyde Park in Chicago. And I, as much as I'd love to welcome everybody on campus, I think there are wonderful opportunities to do programs like this, or to meet in person in Hong Kong, or use the centers as a place for people to have fellowship, to learn, to have conversation in person. I think those are all valuable things.
Great. Is Harris's approach similar to Chicago Booth's, or is it different in that Chicago Booth has established the executive MBA programs that are in London and Hong Kong and in the US, obviously. Is there any plan in the future to have, especially given the pandemic that we're experiencing today, any plan to have actually in-country or in-location or in-center certificate programs for students to participate in?
We do. It's a great point. I'd love to be able to do I think that's definitely, we're a little bit younger school than Booth. They've been around about 20, 30, 40 years more than we have. So there's some things that they're able to do that we're growing into. I'd love to be able to look at sort of in-person programming, with partners. So with the partner university, that can work really well, but also using our centers. We do have a very vibrant credential program in which students, we have a summer data and data scholars program for that blends policy and data analytics. But we have other credentials that we offer. Right now, they're all virtual, but over time, they will be in person. We have an IPAL. We have a partnership with PKU, Peking University. It's called our IPAL program, and we have another on monetary policy. And those credentials are really helpful, Mark, because for students from outside the U.S. that are looking to go to a top 10 PhD program or a top 10 business or social science program, it's just very competitive. I mean, we're up 36% this year in applications. Booth has a record number of applications. We had 420 PhD applications, and we admitted 15 people. So it's incredibly competitive. So I think things that you can do as an international student to sort of get in front of faculty from the US, to learn from other people, to build those relationships, like with our data and policy summer program, you get to do a capstone project that's managed by a UChicago faculty member. And these types of things, like we don't, you can do the Khan Academy and these online Coursera's, but we believe very much in interaction with our faculty to ask questions. We believe in support. So you should have TAs and people that can help you, because sometimes you might be very advanced, but you want to get like super advanced, or maybe you haven't done, you've never coded before, right? But you've done a lot of other things. So we like to meet you where you are and get you up to where you need to be. So these credential programs are very helpful. We have them in writing, we have them in data analytics, we have them in monetary policy, and you're seeing the links there. And those are great on-ramps into doctoral studies or master's programs. So I think that's a great way. And I'd love to expand that portfolio. And, I can't think of whenever we get everybody vaccinated, I can't think of a better location than Hong Kong and the beautiful center that we have there to do some of this programming with.
Yeah, and as I get to know more about Harris personally, I'm really excited about a lot of the programs that you just articulated, and I hope some of the people that are joining us tonight will explore some of those. One of the things that I was really interested and excited about doing these UChicago programs for was not just for alumni and potential students and the community, but it's for our staff. Mm-hmm. And so we have one staff member question that just came in.
Oh, great. Awesome.
Which is really great because we can all learn more. And the question is, are there issues and developments in Asia that have significantly influenced the research and teaching at Harris School? Anything like specifically Asia focused that's been a huge influence?
Well, there's a lot. I think, first of all, the students. I mean, I think part of policy is you can't do it with the same kind of small group of people. You need to bring in diverse viewpoints. You need to bring in people that have grown up in Shanghai or Hong Kong who bring a unique perspective. You need that. You need different backgrounds to have great policy discussions. Our faculty have been praised this. We're about 50% international, 50% US, very diverse within all the segments, 50 countries and all that. So I think our faculty value that diversity, and they're from all over the world. The second piece is, we're all dealing with this pandemic, right? But once that gets settled, issue number one is going to be climate change. And I think, what's happening in Asia, in industry, in transportation, in policy, it's just off the charts, and it's super critical. And I think bringing those ideas, and how do we sort of change behavior in a thoughtful way? I mean, look, there are millions of people in China and India that still haven't gotten cars, and we want them to get cars and air conditioners, but how do we do that in a way that doesn't sort of cause issues, right? And I think there are ways to do that, and I think that's issue number one. And I think bringing that perspective in, and look, the U.S. isn't a leader in this area right now. I mean, it saddens me to say this, but our students aren't sort of growing up in different parts. They haven't been exposed to things that folks from Hong Kong have do every day, right, in these areas. So we need to bring those ideas to forefront. So I think that's number one. But I think also we're all dealing with, Mark, these questions of what do we do with our great cities, right? And these, Hong Kong is definitely one. They're the thing that you mentioned. I guess the thing about Asia that I love is, Chicago is a great U.S. city. It's not Shanghai and Hong Kong, but we share similar issues. So I think when you come to the University of Chicago, you love cities. Like you care about cities, you care about how they work, you care about the culture, you care about transportation, you care about you care about gentrification. You want it to be a place where it's not just for the super wealthy on the penthouse, but there's a place for the middle class and working class folks to do that. But we also don't want to overrun our city. So how do you create the next city that doesn't replicate the mistakes of Mumbai or Chicago, but builds on these best practices? So I think when I think about Asian students, I think a lot about sort of the environment, energy. I think about cities, but I also think about the wonderful culture and history that these students also bring to our classroom and learn from, the way things are happening in other parts of the world.
We were very fortunate last fall to work with Professor William Howell, who shares a joint appointment, I believe.
He's the chair of the political science department, or he has been for a while. Yes, at the social science.
Correct. Yeah, and I mean, we did a program with him called the U.S. Presidential Election Series, and it was really well attended and well received. And I think your point earlier about we can learn from each other. There was a lot of interest in that particular program, and just watching what the outcome of the presidential election was going to be. And Professor Howell really helped to kind of share his insights into a Biden administration versus a Trump administration and U.S.-China relations. So that was a value we already got from a professor from the school last fall.
Yeah, and I think the presidential election is going to, the implications will be huge for the relationship between UChicago, Asian countries. I think we're going to see a much more open immigration policy. We're going to see a much more open in multinational or multi agreements like on climate and development. So I think one thing for that might be surprising or different for folks in Asia is that in Asia, you tend to have sort of a way of doing things, and people change, governments change, but like the basic approach is very similar, right? In the U.S., we go from Bush to Obama to Trump to Biden. So I think there's some differences here, but I think one thing about our new president is, this is actually very similar to a lot of leaders in Asia, is he spent 34 years in the Senate, 8 years as vice president. That's 42 years. Before taking office. I think Obama was a senator for like a couple of years, and then he became president. So he was a little bit like Trump, in a celebrity kind of had a big name following. But Biden has spent years in government, and I think he has an experience with the U.S. and overseas that'll be very helpful for dealing with some of the big problems that we've just kind of talked about. So I think it'll be a very exciting time to study in the U.S., to engage with our faculty, to engage with UChicago. So I think this is a very helpful change. And then, along the lines of Professor Howell, who I think is very helpful, because business leaders who are working in 100 different countries, it's not just bringing the best product to market. You have to understand the regulatory and the political environments in these countries, right? So I think, not just focusing on what the marketing faculty or what the engineering faculty are saying, but understanding what the political theorists and the political economy faculty are thinking is very helpful as you navigate, cross-border transactions and ventures, right? I think it's very helpful. So, but in addition to Professor Howe, we've got some wonderful faculty that are doing work in Asia. Michael Greenstone, the Energy Policy Institute at UChicago, is probably the most forward-thinking, academic, economic-focused center on climate change, right, and energy policy, and they're operating out of India and soon China. They're doing research in China, but the pandemic has slowed some stuff down. But it's a great opportunity there. Chris Blattman and Michael Kremer are doing some of the most innovative work on economic development and developmental economics. We've got 3 Nobel Prize winners in Heckman, Kremer, and Roger Myerson. So there's a lot of great faculty talent. And, even faculty that aren't sort of directly involved in Asia are dealing with the issues that policymakers and leaders are thinking about. How do you think about incentives to, we all love a lot of people love their gas cars and companies are going to go electric, but how do we sort of change behavior to migrate into different ways of doing things? So our behavioral economic faculty think a lot about those nudges and incentives that change behavior. And then, on the data analytics front, I think we are as a program, I think, one thing about UChicago is our law school is probably the most quantitative law school of any out there. Our business school is probably one of the most quantitative business programs. Our social work program is more quantitative than the average. And our policy program is, when you look at Harvard and Princeton, we are more, we use machine learning and data analytics more than other programs do. But we also still blend that with the social science, because ultimately you can't take an algorithm to solve conflicts or radically change income distribution. You have to sit people down and solve problems and take advantage of social science. So I think our data-driven and analytical approach is what will draw that. So a lot of faculty that are figuring out ways of how to use messy, incomplete data or data that has bias in it. How do you clean that up and then do a good policy? Because if you use false data or flawed data, then your output isn't going to be strong, right? So I think those are all things to think about.
We just had a couple questions come in from the audience. And Ranjan, you mentioned UChicago's law school, and somebody asked whether the law school is planning on expanding to Asia. And I don't know if you have any insight.
Yeah, it's not my kettle of fish, but I think they do have a great LLM program, and there are students from Asia that study there. But I think, Mark, you should talk to Dean Miles, and I'm sure they'd be very interested. They have some faculty that are doing a lot on international institutions and transactions. There's a great COVID. Do you want to ask the COVID question? That's a good one.
Sure. What are the challenges and opportunities raised by COVID-19 of researching in public policies?
Well, I'll take this in 2 shots. I think the world is seeing a great sort of test about some countries that have very good public health infrastructure. A lot of countries in Asia, South Korea, just a few miles from, a couple hours from Wuhan, was able to sort of not to be overwhelmed by COVID and to have a lot of business as usual. You contrast that with the US. So, is Samsung and industry in Korea way smarter than the US? No. Korea just had very effective governments that were able to deal with this pandemic, and business was able to operate. So I think the pandemic stuff will ebb. I think we'll find a new normal with that. But then I think the issues that will come up are what COVID exposed. And I think in many different fields, we're not going back to, January of 2020. We're going forward into a new way, right? And I think there's going to be things like, blended learning, the way we've kind of consumed education. I think that'll evolve. We're not going to go all Zoom and Khan Academy, but there'll be some more use of technology and learning. And I think higher education is going to go through a very transformative process over the next, few years. I think the way we think about the number one thing that's going to come up is going to be, climate change. You see this like in the French government. they went with bailouts for Air France. Like they're going to give Air France, money. And I think, we're all trying to, we want to get back on planes to vacation or something, maybe not for meetings, but we want a thriving air industry, right? So we have to subsidize that. But they said, hey, if we're going to give you subsidies, we want you to shut down some smaller hub cities so we can put in high-speed rail. High-speed rail is going to be better for the environment. It's going to put people back to work. And, so those kind of balanced approaches. So I think as we look to, the US is going to pump billions into stimulus, and I think governments around the world are going to do that. So how do we do that in an intentional way that's actually going to build the most long-term value? We don't want to we don't want to refire all of our coal plants. That might be something to do, but we'd rather sort of build, renewable energy. So I think those are the conversations that are going to happen. And I don't know so much about, I'm not as well versed in Asia, but I would say in the US, we've had a year where a lot of students, particularly low income students, have been out of school or not getting the services and support that they need. So I think there is going to be a K through 12 focus in the next couple of years of how do we get kids back on track, and how do we also deal with their social and emotional wellness. And I think that's an issue that in Asia, when I talk to parents of young kids and people going to college, they ask me a lot about academics, but they also ask me a lot about, is my student going to be cared for? Are they going to be nurtured? Are they going to be successful? Not just academically, but also outside the classroom. So I think those are some of the issues. And there's a lot of inequality issues that we've seen emerge on race in the US, but across the world. And I think those kinds of issues we'll be dealing with. So I think that's one of the reasons why we're up in applications. I think people understand that policy and that intersection of markets and non-market forces is huge. And I think that's where the focus will be over the next few years.
You mentioned, and you are a living example of somebody who has an MBA and an MA in public policy. As we think about our alumni base, there are many Booth alumni who have public policy positions in government around the world. And as you referred to, there are many public policy graduate alums who have business positions today, prominent positions today. Does Harris offer classes in conjunction with Booth? Can you get a joint degree? Could you explain that a little bit to the? Sure.
So we have a very warm and strong relationship with Booth in a number of ways. So first of all, we both kind of teach the same way. We have, we're heavily influenced by behavioral economics, stats, data. We're very quantitative in our approach. We have a joint program. Anywhere from 20 to 25 students a year will do that. They'll do a 3-year program. They start at Harris because our data and economics classes are a little harder than Booth. So you start here, and then you can kind of take all the take a lot of the interesting business classes. So that's one way. There's also another 10 or 15 students a year who start at Harris and then decide, you know what, I want to go to business school. I didn't know about it. A lot of people don't, like when you're 8,000 miles away applying to schools, it's hard to know all the different nuances, but you get on the ground, you say, hey, you know what, I really see some value in looking at non-market forces at Harris, but also thinking about the market and putting that together in one package. And look, Mark, if you're in banking, healthcare, energy, you're thinking a lot about regulations and changing the playing field to adapt in multiple countries. So that policy background is very critical, right? And I think that's where. Also, for people that don't want to do a joint program, you could take 2 or 3 classes at Booth. I did that when I was a student. I took finance at Booth. So you can do that. And Booth students, they have the Rastandi Center, which I think you've worked with, or I think you're definitely people in Hong Kong are familiar with. So the Social New Venture Challenge, they're like, it's a, kind of the Shark Tank, which is a US show. I don't know if it's in Hong Kong where like people can pitch things. So that's the Social New Venture is a big thing at Booth. Harris students participate in that. We've won the Social New Venture Challenge. We've got of the 16 teams, we've got 3 or 4 teams that are in the finals right now. So, and then faculty, the Becker-Friedman Institute is probably the best example of this. You have economists like Catherine Baker and Michael Kremer and Chris Blattman that are part of the social science, and Booth, like Richard Thaler. So Richard Thaler and Dean Kate Baker talked about, how do you incentivize people to get the vaccines and stuff like that. So there's a lot of cross-pollination. But I think it's, in terms of in thinking about it, I think people should think about what kind of outcome you want to have, and do you want to have this cross-sectoral thing? And then the final point is, what I've seen, Mark, is once people have achieved a certain success in business, they think a lot about not just their bottom line or their company's stock price. They think about the broader picture. So Dennis Keller, he's a University of Chicago trustee. He founded. He's one of the most innovative thinkers in higher ed. He started a series of online businesses and schools in the U.S. And when he thought about his legacy and he thought about what he wanted to be known for, he made a transformative gift to the Harris School to build a new building for us, the Keller Center. But he's a Booth graduate. Right. So, but when he thought about that long-term sort of, value, he thought about how can I change policy, which will have a big impact on a lot of people's lives. And when I talk to CEOs in Hong Kong and India, they have the business down, but they want to make sure that their frontline workers have access to quality education. That, if you go to places in Asia, and Mark, this, you're in a world-class city that you can't walk around in because of the pollution at times, and that's heartbreaking, right? And that can't be solved by any one company. Governments have to solve those issues. So I think when you think about those things, they think a lot about their legacy and their impact, and a lot of business people then think about policy. And I think for policymakers, young in your career, you can have incredible impact in industry. I mean, in industry, you can do things, like Google and some of these big energy companies can do things that governments can never do, right? So I think it's a combination, and I think that's why the cross-sectorial, moving back and forth, I think is the way to go, and I think that's what young people will want to do moving forward.
I'm fascinated by the fact that you said you had, I think, 3 or 4 new ventures in the Social New Venture Challenge that kind of have risen to the top. I like to say that there are new ventures in every walk and every discipline. And this kind of relates to the question that came in from the audience, which is, as an undergraduate, how should they be thinking about preparing for a major in public policy? What are the career paths for them beyond just working in a government or an NGO?
Well, I think that they're one, I think you touched on it. You have the ability to create your own job, right? There's this intersection of stitching government and industry together. There's an in-between player. It could be consultants, could be technology integrators. I think there's a lot of opportunity to bring those two together for students. In terms of the skills, I think this is where Asia has a big advantage in that to do very well at upper level competitive public policy, social science programs, economics in the U.S. You need a really strong math background. I mean, 4 or 5 college level, upper level classes, Calc 3, linear algebra, real analysis, geek up on that stuff, right? For sure. And and make sure you do, but also make sure you're well-rounded. Don't just take every, coding math class, but make sure you can write, make sure you, our new president, Paul Alavestos, the new president, he's one of the top chemists in the world. His technology or his innovation was part of the breakthrough in LCD TVs. I mean, he's a pioneer in science. And he said that when he came to UChicago to major in chemistry, what he took away was an appreciation for art. It's that exposure to art and thinking about things in a new way that were transformative to him. So I'd say make sure you also are doing some things outside of STEM, that you're exposing yourself to wonderful culture, ideas, literature across populations. I think another nice thing about summer programs or programs like ours is get yourself where you're with different people, very different backgrounds. Like put yourself in a program where you can be with people from other parts of the world, other languages. I think those are the kinds of things that stand out. When I see, like, the thing about higher education in the US at very competitive schools, you want to have resiliency. You want to show that you can overcome challenges. The same thing, when you're making an investment and you're backing a founder, you want to, you love their plan, but you also want to see, have they been able to adapt to adversity? So taking, studying abroad or double majoring in computer science and English or something like that. I mean, these things, kind of show that you're able to take something on, to maybe struggle. Don't be afraid to try things and not be an ace at it. That I think sometimes there's a pressure that I won't try it unless I'm going to master it. So I think those are the things I would say. Get a good math foundation, take a well-rounded sort of background. And then as far as careers, I think, technology firms, industry, we have a lot of graduates from that go back to Asia and work in the financial sector, in investment banks, in private equity, in financial services. We have a lot of folks that work in technology, in health, in multinational companies. So I think there's a wide swath. But I think for sometimes you have to make sure, when you're looking at a program, that it's not just teaching you in the classroom, but providing you with networking opportunities, like through the Hong Kong Center, to meet alums and to meet senior people. And culturally, that's very different in Asia. It's not easy to walk up to somebody as nice as you are, Mark, with gray hair, and just introduce yourself when you're 24 years old. But you have to do that in the US, right? So you get those kind of experiences through our alumni networks. And my colleague, Shalene Liao, has put together a wonderful program with our global centers and our alumni in Asia to interact with our students, right? So they're going to share best practices from their industries so that students, while they're in our program, can take and learn that and then adapt and make sure they have the right internship or they make the right connection to pivot, to get into these kind of very competitive roles. So I think these are the kinds of programs that are very helpful. So I would look at, it's one thing to recruit students from Asia, and there are a lot of great reasons. You guys are very smart, and you help these schools in many ways, but make sure that these schools are investing with centers, with support staff, with people, with staff that have grown up in Asia, like Shalene, who went to Fudan, and so you have people that know your experience, right? I think you put all that together. It's the same way you'd invest in a stock. You kind of make sure that the management is thinking long-term and they're investing in their talent and their resources. So I think those are the things I would look at when thinking about graduate school and preparing for that. And the nice thing about the credential programs is, look, these are big investments. I mean, opportunity cost for young people today is huge. I mean, 2 years is a lifetime in some companies or organizations. So if you're going to spend a couple of years or 5 years on a PhD program, hundreds of thousands of dollars, traveling and all that stuff, test drive this, get an exposure, see if it's a good fit for you. So take a small, course, a summer program, and really see if it's right for you or how you can get the most out of that 2-year experience. I think, Mark, when you look back, you're amazed at how fast it goes, right? So you want to hit the ground in the fall at a school and be able to get the most out of it. And I think, the more you can prep, the better you will be.
I'm so glad you mentioned yourself, and then that our new president coming in, believe in sort of like these multidisciplinary approaches to learning and exploring new areas. It's one of the reasons I'm here in Hong Kong, to try to help young people really understand not to be one track, because you get a certain point of success in your career, and then you look back and say, well, what else do I have? So it's really important to cultivate those other areas of interest early on. And so I'm glad to hear that you talking about that.
And I mean, I'd imagine being in Hong Kong and not taking advantage of the rich art and culture and just, in a lab, right? I mean, not that the lab's bad, but I think, getting around to different things. And I know that the programming you guys do is not just on business and industry. You have a lot of rich programming across, once we're able to do the rich programming back, and you guys are able to do that. I think it's a wonderful part of the university, the Harper Lecture Series that comes out. You get exposed to a lot of different faculty and ideas.
I think that's really a good point. I mean, we have so many free programs. All you have to do is go on our website, uchicago.hk, and there's so many free programs to help you get familiar with how faculty think, how other participants, other students, other prospects think. All of this is free for those people that are in the audience today to take advantage of. The other thing that you said, I think, is really interesting. I think is kind of a misconception that you only go to Booth to have a business career, or you only go to Harris to have a policy career. And you just mentioned some good examples of people that were on the business side and ended up in policy, and on the policy side and ended up in business. I think that's something that's so important for people to understand, that there's not one path, there's not one track. You can get a policy degree and end up prominent in the business world.
Well, and I think, Mark, is, we all live, multifaceted lives even within our career. I mean, the thing that differentiates UChicago College or Harris students or Booth is not just their impressive careers. And, we have incredible outcomes, of 96% placement rate, within 5 years, 100K in the US salaries, but a high job satisfaction. People really love what they do, right? So that's one thing. But the other thing is, like, there's what you do 9 to 5 or 9 to 9 in Asia, right? You work a lot of hours, but then you're involved in your community. You're involved in weekends and in your community, in the arts or in education or in economic development. So, even if you're for a lot of leaders, you're on a nonprofit board or you're on a school board and you're thinking about how to help this nonprofit organization. So that's where this training in different disciplines is going to be helpful. And eventually that hobby becomes your career in your second or third act. But, in the US, people are very involved in their communities. And a lot of times, we get sometimes, an ex-banker who's like, I'm in my late 50s. I'm gonna do a lot of philanthropy, nonprofit work, and I want to do it right. So I'm coming to your evening program, or I'm coming to a credential to learn how to do things. So I think it's just kind of curiosity and lifelong learning that is true with our students. But also, in your life, you're going to have your job, but you're also going to be very involved, and maybe you're involved in corporate social responsibility, and you want to do that right. It's a requirement, but you want to get the most out of that for your organization. And so I think, those exposures are going to be very helpful.
Going back to the question the person asked, what can they do? You have this writing program now, and I have to say that one of the things that I could encourage the audience members or any student who wants to apply is not just to take, the math and the stats and all those, deeply math intensive programs, but also to take a writing program. Can you tell us a little bit about the writing program that you're offering?
Yeah, we are the lead course leader is a really thoughtful David Christinger. He's focused on sort of effective policy memos and policy writings, right? And I think so often, when we talk to alumni, we just talked to a great group of alumni recently. They said the policy memo writing class, it's not a class, it's sort of in each of our classes, you have to write a memo, right? It is the most valuable thing that they've done, because, you won't get to give somebody 40 pages of something, right? You gotta be succinct, you gotta be impactful. So, so much of policy is storytelling, right? It's connecting with your audience. The great leaders across the world have that ability to connect with people from around the world, and in 1 or 2 minutes can take complex ideas and make people feel good about it. And the other piece of this, Mark, is, in the US and in other parts of the world, just showing up to, African Americans or, people in the Middle East that are in conflict and showing them an algorithm or a proof isn't going to wipe away centuries of conflict. You have to demonstrate empathy. You have to show that you understand their condition, what's going on. So it's a combination of that. So I think in this 6-week program, we teach people how to be storytellers, how to write effective memos, but also how do you tell a story with data, right? How do you sort of make that, how do people feel connected to that data and then move to the right thing, right? So I think those are all important things. It's great to have the ideas and to be able to do machine learning and all that great stuff, but people have to understand it. And many times you're going to be dealing with an official, a business leader that doesn't have the training that you have, and you've got to find a way to connect, right? And that's what, the one thing that you see from when you talk to the top consulting firms, McKinsey, Bain, they know you're going to be smart, but they want to make sure you can connect with a client and make them feel that you're not talking down to them, but you're with them, and you can sort of make them feel you're part of the team. And that's all part of this type of thing that we try to work on. I would say we're more known for data, but I think we definitely are very good communicators, and we work on sort of collaboration and consensus building. And I think these are the kinds of things you learn.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because my follow-up question was, what about presentation skills? And you nailed it. So, you covered that aspect of it. Just one.
And I think, Mark, it's something we have to work on because, I think for a lot of students that come from Asia and other parts of the world, it's a very different style, right? So I think adapting, I think learning what works in different markets is also very important. And I think that's a key. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Maybe, we're coming up on the end of the hour here, which probably surprised both you and me. But our audience is hanging in there with us. And I know that a couple people wanted to know about scholarships for one thing. And then I'm curious, just like with COVID and the applications, the surge of applications that you're getting, are you continuing to get a lot of applications from folks in Asia wanting to come to Chicago to enter the programs, or has that dropped off a bit?
No, we're seeing, significant growth in applications from Asia. And it's heartening because we haven't, there was a lot of concern about the climate in the U.S. While UChicago has always been a place that's welcomed international students from our very founding, there was a concern, right? And I think I'm very excited to see the increase in applications. We don't see as much interest in Hong Kong. And I think, in part because it's a very business focused community and people are and they have wonderful universities there. So we always want to see more students from Hong Kong, but we're seeing some. So it's a very competitive process, but I think we also, one thing, Mark, that I don't know if people are aware of, we have probably the most STEM public policy programs in the US. So we have multiple STEM certificates that are part of our MPP that give people that sort of flexibility when coming to the US. So that's something that is unique. And I think that's also been very popular with students. So we're seeing a lot of interest this year and we're excited by that. We offer scholarships to international students. And, for example, our PhD program is fully funded. So that's a full tuition and living stipend. So for 5 or 6 years. So that's, highly competitive and very popular. But we do have scholarships for our master's program. We just started one for our MS, our computational analysis and public policy program. So it combines computer science and public policy. We have a TC Young scholarship that was funded by a UChicago alum. So that's for students from China or interested in China. They don't have to be from China, but interested in data and policy in the region. So we have a scholarship that's available and they prefer students with a little bit of work experience. And I think that's one thing I would say, Mark, don't necessarily be in a hurry to get to graduate school. I think there's a tendency, like I got to do all my learning in a straight shot. Like I go to undergrad, then I go to grad school. I think it's really great to do a couple of years of work in research, in a consulting firm, in a financial, whatever job, just to get some life experience. And then go to graduate school after a couple of years. Now, business schools have always done that. They might want 5 to 7. For a policy school, I think a couple of years is fine. You can also do some service projects like Teach for China or Teach for Asia or something like that. Those are or those types of service type things are great experience where you're doing frontline things. And then you come in with a little bit maturity. Your resume is a little deeper. You have a sense of what your functional experience is. It's not like I want to do policy, but do I want to be the data analytics person? Do I want to be the program manager? Do I want to be the marketer? Do I want to be the fundraiser? Do I want to be the CFO? So I think some work experience to help you identify the function. And then you can think about the sector or the area, right? So I think those types of things are helpful. So we'll be looking at some deferred, because of the interest in our program, we'll be looking at like similar to what the business schools do, a deferred admissions program where we have opportunities for students to work and then come join us after they've done a couple of years in industry or nonprofits.
Excellent, Ranjan. Well, I want to thank you so much for your time this evening and for sharing more with the audience about the Harris School of Public Policy. Really appreciate your time, and we look forward to partnering with you more on the Yuen campus.
Yeah, I can't wait to be there in person. There's no better place to be than Hong Kong. Shilling and I love visiting and love visiting the center staff. And I think there was some interest for participants in learning more about our programs, not just at Harris, but across UChicago. we believe in making sure you have the right information so you can talk to Mark's great team at the Hong Kong Center, come in, or if you want to be connected with us, and we'll get you, I want you to get to the right program. I'm not just wanting you to come to Harris. If Booth's the right spot, or the social science division, or the Crown Family School of social service is good, we'll get you to the right place. So feel free to take advantage of my team, of Mark's team, if you want to learn more about our programming and build a relationship. And I think there's no better way to learn more, to figure out the right fit than to spend time to each other, have many cups of tea. So take advantage of the wonderful programming that the Hong Kong Center has, and get to know the UChicago approach.
Thank you so much, Ranjan. You have a great day.
You too. Thank you. And thank you for everybody for joining us. It's been my pleasure, and feel free to circle back with me. I'd love to answer any questions if you didn't get a chance to cover in the chat.